Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Listen, I'd be really grateful if you didn't snap and clap if you hear something you like. And the reason is I can't bear the absolute silence. I want to tell you a story, too. I grew up in the South Bronx. And I left to go to college. And I didn't move back to New York until I was 28, for 28 years. And I'd lived in a lot of places. But the one place I thought of as home was the old neighborhood. And as soon as I got back to New York, I went to visit the old neighborhood. And I walked around my schoolyard. And it wasn't the schoolyard I remembered. There was glass all over the place, used condoms, and crack vials. I could have filled a baggie with all the crack vials. I generally took 2 back to my office, just to remember. And every time I did it, the physical plant staff at the college would have it gone the next morning. I think they were trying to protect my reputation. In any case, I walked down the street I'd walked down thousands and thousands of times after the schoolyard. And for the first time in my life, I was scared. The building across the street where friends lived was a pile of rubble. My own building had a huge iron gate in front of it that required a key. The stores I shopped at were gone. The best deli I remembered was now a bodega. The movie theater was gone. My old synagogue had become a Pentecostal church. And I came back to Teachers College. I was really angry. I was angry that they, whoever they may be, had changed the world and nobody asked me. When I went back to the old neighborhood time after time thereafter, it was still the old neighborhood. The people who lived there were different. When I lived there, it was 98% white. It was now 98% people of color. When I lived there, it was a working class neighborhood. Very few of the parents had finished high school. It was now a very poor neighborhood. And the attendance rate or the graduation rates had actually declined. The average income, which was less than the national average when I lived there, had plummeted. Violence had gone sky high. Single parents had gone sky high. I went to visit the old apartment in which I lived. And in my old bedroom, I met a boy who was 14 years old. His bed was in the same place as my bed. We looked out the same window every morning when we woke up. We used the same bathroom. We watched TV in the same living room. We ate our breakfasts in the same kitchen. He gave me a glimpse of the world, of what the world was like in this community, which was predominantly Dominican now. And I met his friends, and I spent 10 years with his friends and with him. I want to tell you about one of his friends. His name is Leo. Leo came to the United States when he was young. He lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with his mom, his sister, his brother, and a tenant, a boarder. What was true, too, about Leo was when you walked down his block, Leo could point corner by corner by corner who the drug dealer was on that block. Leo told me stories about kids who'd gotten killed. They seemed so outrageous that I checked his numbers on the police blotters. If anything, he underestimated what was happening in the neighborhood. Leo joined a gang to protect himself. Leo didn't have real good experiences in school. Both his middle school and his high school were subsequently closed for their poor academic performance by the city of New York. But when Leo went there, he was left back twice in middle school. He never really graduated, but through social promotion, he went to high school. His high school was so large a place, so many kids, that lunch started at 9:30 in the morning. Different floors in the school were controlled by different gangs. So if you belonged to one gang, you could never, ever go to your English class because it was controlled by another gang. It was a school in which very few kids graduated. Leo started cutting within the first 2 weeks of school. It wasn't just him, it was all his friends. They all left. Leo dropped out midway through his freshman year of high school. His mom was Dominican, obviously. She didn't speak English, although she had a lot of education. She always had minimum wage jobs. When I first met them, his mom was working at Kennedy Airport cleaning toilets. She traveled 2 hours to Kennedy Airport every day and 2 hours back. She slept 5 hours a night. She needed the money to support her family. She didn't have much time with her children. She's a single mom. Dad lived in the Dominican Republic. He made his living largely by appropriating motorcycles. Leo found that hooky parties were more valuable to him than going to school. It was a neighborhood that when I lived in had a smattering of doctors, teachers, a few lawyers. When Leo lived there, the most successful people in the neighborhood were gang leaders and drug dealers. There were absolutely no role models. When I lived there was a super highway between my neighborhood and college. You watched as brothers and sisters and neighbors who were older than you went straight from the neighborhood to college. And you followed after them. I knew I was going to college with the same predictability that I'd have breakfast next morning. In Leo's neighborhood was one in which kids went to more funerals than they did weddings. It was a neighborhood in which they had something called grilling. If somebody stared at you, it was a sign of disrespect. And you had to fight them. And the fights involved fists, and they involved feet, and they involved knives, and often they involved guns. There was no kid there that I met who didn't have a story about the time he was mugged and badly beaten. Visited Leo's friends in jail, went to a funeral. Leo, after dropping out, tried the Job Corps federal program, and that didn't work out. Leo, at the age of 19, was shot and killed by the police. Let me tell you about another one of the boys, real quickly, who had a background that was real similar to Leo's. He, too, after his freshman year of high school, had completed one credit. His name was Juan Carlos. Juan Carlos was thrown out of school for slugging a security guard. We placed him in a new school. It's called the Heritage School. Not far from here. It's a public school. It turned him around. Juan Carlos will be graduating from college, Baruch College, in December. You know, once upon a time I was driving down a highway, and in front of me I saw all of these people, all these cars that had crashed into each other. And I thought to myself, why weren't they paying attention? How could they have allowed that to happen? When I hit the same slick they hit and moved across 4 lanes of traffic into the same crash. Neighborhoods have slicks. The slick in my neighborhood led to college. The slick in Leo's neighborhood led to very little education. It led to violence. It led to low-paid jobs. Too often it led to death at an early age. Juan Carlos was an anomaly. People did not go to college in that neighborhood. People didn't finish high school in that neighborhood. That was a neighborhood in which middle school proms looked like something you might have in high school or in college. And the reason is the kids in that neighborhood are never, ever going to finish high school. This is their last prom. Across the prom, I saw a banner, and it said, "No dream, too small." I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't figure out why it was wrong. It took me 2 days, and suddenly it hit me. Nobody had ever told me no dream was too small. They told me I could be whatever I wanted to be, that anything was possible. These were schools that were preparing kids for lives of poverty and lives of violence, and anything was good enough. What I would say is this. I don't think I'm going to speak to a group this year that has more potential, more caring than you, or you wouldn't be here. But with the promise and the potential and what you've grown up with, for many of you, comes an obligation and a responsibility. And again, you know that or you wouldn't be here. In my religion, we believe that to save one life, is to save the world. And I want to tell you right now, you can each save one life. What it took to save Juan Carlos was one arm around one kid. You have the potential as a tutor, as somebody who works with a school, a public school in New York City, to make a difference if you embrace one child. As you get older and choose a career, you have a chance to save thousands of lives if you become a teacher, if you go into the theater, if you become a professor, if you go into social services, if you become a doctor, if you become a lawyer. One of the most altruistic things I can imagine doing as a business person is opening a factory in the South Bronx. It's taking poor kids into your business. It's showing them a world they don't understand. If you choose business, you can also make a huge difference. And you can make a difference in millions of lives. If you go into media, as we just heard about today's show, if you go into policy, if you go into government. And the one thing I'd urge you is the reason that you're here. Be the change. Be the change. Thank you all.